far more than just a chemical. Yo, what's going on? It's someone that's someone, and welcome back to today's report. Today's report was sent in by Connor when this happened, summer of 2020. The drugs used, LSD and cannabis, at a dose of 600 micrograms in various bong hits. The route of administration, orally and smoked. Gender, male. Weight, 155 pounds. Age, 17. Height, 6'1". For his prior experience, he notes LSD, mushrooms, nitrous, some pills and opiates, which I'm not proud to say. For his set, he notes bad state of mind. In the setting, his friend's garage mostly. Okay, so today, we have a life-changing trip report from Connor. Leading up to this experience, he had gotten arrested recently with some friends with drugs. And in result, this made his family disappointed and furious with him. They found out about his various drug use, and to put it simply, things weren't all peachy back home. After a fight, he goes off to his friend's place, where he would make some impulsive decisions that eventually leads him to taking 2 tabs over the night, which during this, his family is looking for him, as well as the police. These conditions alone are enough to inspire a strong trip, but it seems the trip and the tabs he took were bound to give him a strong trip regardless. It may have been possible that this wasn't LSD, as the trip goes far past 12 hours. Connor experiences reality-bending visuals quickly in his trip, and it builds up to the point where he experiences a very strong loss of ego. It doesn't seem to be a full-on ego death, but by the way he describes it, he was definitely on the verge. This is a pretty wild experience, so I'll let it speak for itself. I'm sure you'll enjoy this one, so without further ado, let's dive right into this. "600 microgram insanity trip." Before I get into the trip, I need to give a little background a week prior. I was caught with my friend by the police on a parking garage. Together, we had 24 beers, about 25 edible nerd ropes, wax, vapes, etc. Needless to say, it wasn't a good situation. I was picked up by my parents, and luckily didn't get any charges or fines. My parents then caught on to my drug use and found pictures of sheets of acid, mushrooms, Xanax, Ritalin, etc. on my phone. They were extremely and understandably mad about this. A week passed to me laying in my room in a depressed state. I felt horrible about everything. One day my mom comes in, loses her shit at me, and this causes me to leave the house on my bicycle and meet up with some of my friends. I brought some coins from a collection I had from when I was younger and sold them at a shop for $250. I decided to buy a quad of weed, which I picked up later in the day, and 2 tabs of acid. These tabs were my go-to double-sided blotter tabs, and they were very strong. I made this stupid decision to trip out of anger. My friend Anthony let me stay in his garage with another friend Jake and a kid Joey who was only there for a little. I am quickly notified by my friends that my parents called the police on me for leaving the house, because the cops were calling some of my friends' parents who were also caught at the parking garage with me. Either way, I decided to pop these tabs on my tongue, which were said to be 600 micrograms total. But obviously, there's no way to know if this was completely accurate, although it was definitely my most intense trip. I have not eaten or drank anything before this. I was low in sleep and hadn't done any drugs for about a week or more. I feel uncomfortable during the come-up, and this is very unusual. At this point, I have always had the best of times on LSD and was always able to handle myself the best out of all my friends, and could appear pretty sober to my friends or family if need be. After 20 minutes or so, we head out to this gazebo that was right by Anthony's house. As I'm chilling there, I notice I'm coming up hard as fuck. It's 30 minutes in, and I'm already seeing patterns. This was different. I have never came up this fast. Usually it takes much longer for patterns to be visible. We were all sitting in this gazebo, and patterns were forming on the sidewalk that had pink chalk stretched all over it. I was kinda squirming in my seat and couldn't really find a comfortable position. Once 40 minutes hit, I'm feeling extremely uncomfortable, but I've convinced myself it's just that acid come-up feeling. A trend throughout this trip is me not trying to admit I'm in a bad trip because I feel it will make it worse as well as make my friends nervous, so I kept all of these uncomfortable thoughts and feelings to myself. At this point, Anthony let me know the police called his grandma, asking if he knew anything about my whereabouts. Anthony said they were coming to check for me at around 9 p.m., and this made me very unsettled. Usually, when I trip, I feel strong and confident, but I was feeling weak and paranoid. I keep convincing myself that it's all good and that I'll get through it. I asked Jake and Joey to go on a little walk. As I'm walking, I'm feeling really weak, like almost unstable too, but I just keep putting one foot in front of the other. Everything is so warped. The sidewalks are long, and it's like I'm looking at the world from one of those 360-degree cameras where the edges of the world are bent. I look up to the buildings, and this is when I got kinda freaked out. The side of the building bent so much that it was touching the ground and then flipped under into this repeating infinite pattern. The whole world was bending down to the point of the ground, and as I walked, I saw one point in the middle of my vision that everything appeared to be being tugged to. It had been about 50 minutes in, and this freaked me the fuck out. The reason being, I had taken a dose that was about the same as this before, and it took 2.5 to 3 hours to start peaking, and even the peak was nowhere near as visually intense as what I was witnessing in that moment, only 50 minutes in. Jake gets a call from Anthony, and Anthony said, "Cops called again, and they're not coming until tomorrow morning." Thank God, I instantly felt so much better. We all walk over to Anthony's car and hop in to pick up the weed. Before we pick up, we just drive around. Anthony turned on Midnight City by M83, and I genuinely don't think he could have picked a better song. We were all grooving, feeling amazing. It felt like everyone on the road was grooving with us. A dude on a motorcycle started head bobbing to the song, and then some dude in a car did the same when 679 was playing. He literally looked at us, and we were talking back and forth at stoplights with people. I was feeling fantastic. Then we bought this weed that looked great, but then I was beginning to feel off again. I was imagining the world was odd. I'm usually very good with directions, but I was completely lost as to where we were. I see some old lady walking and start wondering what her life is like. Then I start getting tripped out, wondering about everyone's life and what's the point of them. Basically at this point, I was starting to get confused and everything seemed really weird and uncomfortable. We went back to Anthony's garage and smoked some bowls out of Jake's bong. The bud was very nice. We had the bong in the refrigerator because it gives such a nice cold hit, and Anthony said you can taste the flower better. I don't know how accurate this statement was, but hey, I sure as hell believed it. After the weed, shit started getting worse almost instantly. I was looking at Anthony's dog, and it just looked weak or dead, and I was feeling so off. We went back in Anthony's car to drop Joey off because he was saying he had to go home for some reason. He played Elton John in the car. I don't know why, but I was feeling extremely uncomfortable, and I was just waiting till Joey left because I was hoping some new music would lighten the mood. He left, and I asked to play some songs. I turned on Hard Work Pays Off, one of my favorite Juice WRLD songs, and it sounded horrible. The song got very deep-pitched in a demonic way. Words in the song were lengthened, and I couldn't control it. I kept switching songs, but all were horrible and evil. I kept trying to think of new songs to play, but couldn't even think of another one. I felt like an evil presence was around me, and that I had seriously fucked up this time. I started seeing normal cars as cop cars with flashing lights and everything. I was extremely paranoid and could not control it. I still have not told my friends anything about these weird occurrences. I started looking at my friends, and they looked evil. I felt everyone was in on it except me, like I was in on some twisted joke getting played by everyone. I knew it wasn't true, but I couldn't help the thought. We finally got back to the garage, though I don't really remember parking or entering. Looking at myself and my friend, we looked anorexic, and then my friend started stretching to the point where his chin was 2 feet long and his body was so bent it looked like a stairwell in which his legs were on the bottom left of my peripheral and his head on the top right. It was hard for me to look at them when talking because it scared me so much. I saw the devil in his eyes, but I knew he just wanted to help me. We went into the garage, and I smoked a little more. Then I tried to eat. I made a PB&J, but when I took one bite, It was so dry and nasty. It felt like I sank into the ground and couldn't swallow. I managed to get that one bite down because I knew I should eat, as I hadn't ate all day, and Jake was adamant about me eating. I was getting evil auditory hallucinations, and this is where my memory kinda gets fucked up. Visuals started getting so intense, I wasn't really even seeing any reality. The colors were so insane. Even when I closed my eyes, I was seeing this weird, orangish, infinite spiral pattern take over my vision until it was all I could really see. I remember laying down, but when I went to sit up, I realized I never even lied down. I was already sitting up. I couldn't tell where my body ended, or the chair, or even where the floor began. I asked to go on a walk with Jake. When we walked, I remember having to stop because I thought something happened, and when I asked what happened, Jake said a car just drove by. It's really hard to remember anything that I was thinking, but another thing that I kind of remember is, when I walked along the sidewalk, I couldn't stop thinking I was running into blocks, and I saw rainbow outlines shooting out of the ground. It was some of the craziest visuals I have ever seen. I was in a completely alien world. Nothing appeared familiar. The rainbow colors were so vivid, even though it was so dark outside. I barely remember any of this walk except the blocks moving out of the ground in front of me. When I looked at Jake, he was as thin as a rail, and I kinda just tried to look forward. Things only got crazier. A while back, my friend Conrad ego-deathed extremely hard, to the point where he was going crazy, screaming, and even hitting us. I saw what he was seeing through his eyes, and I understood all the gibberish he was saying. It was like I was in his trip, seeing everything he said. I understood his gibberish. I was kinda going back through time, seeing what he saw. When I tried to explain things, I would stutter and couldn't get the words out. In my head, it made sense, but I couldn't say it in words. I got these weird images of maybe entities, but it's very hard to remember. It looked like these faces, almost in 2 dimensions, with multiple layers. Like how when you look at a person and their shadow, it's like 2 of the same things overlapping. And under this entity that was looking, things were written. The word trip, but spelled like TRYP. I don't know if this was a vision or something I just saw in my head, but it was absolutely wild. At this point, I wasn't having the negative thoughts, as I was just too gone to even think about that. The trip had taken over so much of me that I was just basically going with it. I was trapped in many thought loops and would kind of forget every 5 seconds, as if my memory was only 5 seconds long. I even saw back to Jake's trip from months back, and was recalling memories from my childhood. Everything started to make sense in the entire universe. I'm not sure where I was when this was happening, but I assumed the garage. I was zooming through this blue-looking dimension, and it felt like I gained all the knowledge of the world, but couldn't put it into the English language. It's like the type of knowledge you can only understand when in the mindset. You just can't bring it back to the real world. Jake and I eventually went and just sat in Anthony's car because Anthony had to go up to his room since his grandma had no idea we were over. I started talking to Jake, talking like I've never talked to anyone before. I talked about how fucked up I felt for what I did with my family and how I dragged them into it, and even told him about the trip because he knew I wasn't having a great time. But I didn't tell him anything about the extent of it. I'm pretty good at playing off fear. I probably just looked like a scared person having an ego death. In reality, the trip was terrifying, and by far the most intense and scary thing I've ever experienced. Opening up like that helped me a lot. I was still tripping extremely hard, so what I said was probably hard to understand, but he was there for me. He said, "I have to tell you something," and I got extremely scared. I started tensing up because for some reason I thought he was going to tell me either something evil or that he was gay or something, and it frightened me so much. He was like, "I don't want to scare you, I'll just tell you later." But that freaked me out even more, so I made him tell me. Turns out his dad had been spam calling him about me, and later, after the trip, he told me the local police were also spamming him. I felt horrible about this, but Jake told me, "Don't worry, I'm here for you. We'll figure this out later." After talking to Jake in the car, we went back in the garage, and it was just a waiting game until Anthony could come out. Jake didn't bring up the police calling him until after the trip, because he didn't want me stressing more than I already was. In the meantime, Jake went to sleep, and I was just lying on the ground next to him. At this point, I started to think about my life, my family, and what path I want to go with my life. When I started thinking about my ego death, the craziest thing happened. Something I can and will never be able to explain. I felt a click inside of my head, and it felt like a lightning bolt inside my brain. I saw an image of my brain, and this lightning bolt struck it, causing everything to flip upside down, and I instantly felt, I don't need this. I don't need weed. I don't need drugs. I started thinking about school and my path and what really mattered in my life. This was something that, if you told me an hour before, I would have never believed you. In that moment, everything made sense in the world. I had never been so confident in a feeling, and I knew I could do it. I decided I was going to tell my parents what I did and just be honest for once. I knew that when my mom saw the look in my eye, she would know I was serious and she would believe me. I really feel I needed this trip. It turned me around and got me to stop lying to myself. I came to many realizations about myself and my life. And after that day, I changed and acknowledged. I think the ego death let me think about my situation without my ego, without my bias conscious or subconscious. I thought in a way I never had before, and I saw my situation for what it really was. And this I will never forget, the feeling of the click and the confidence that followed. After some time, I heard a hissing gurgling sound and turned to Jake. I see his lips bubbling with blood and a stream shooting out. I instantly freak out and was like, Jake, Jake! And he woke up in fear, probably as scared as I was, and I told him what happened. And he was like, what the fuck? I'm so sorry, man. I shouldn't have slept. I told him he needed to sleep, and I felt bad about waking him, and I just never lost my mind in this way. That image will probably forever stick with me. I told Jake to go back to sleep because he really needed and deserved some sleep. Finally, Anthony comes down and opens the garage door, which scared the fuck out of us because my mind instantly went to the worst case scenario. We start driving, and within 10 minutes, Anthony's grandma calls him and asks, where are you? Anthony's like, Granny, I'm just going out for a smoke. And we drive back. He goes back up, and not 10 minutes later, comes down again, and we hit the road. When we started driving into my town, I ducked because I saw a whole search party looking for me. Then I looked up, and it was gone. The search party didn't look like real people, though. They were just black beings that were all different heights and positioned at all different angles. So they formed this jagged-like edge to my horizon line. This was 12 hours in, so I don't know how I was still tripping that hard. Either way, we picked up 2 kids, and we're just kinda chilling out. I'm in complete awe in the moment of realization that I just had. The scary things did not faze me at this time. I felt weirdly alive. I had never had an experience so life-changing in my life. Then eventually, we went back into the garage. Jake and Anthony smoked, but I said I'm good and told them about this plan I came up with. They thought I was crazy and just tripping out at first, but then they knew I was serious and was like, okay dude, good luck. At about 4:30 a.m., Anthony went back upstairs while Jake and I stayed in the garage. He slept and I stayed up just thinking. I cleaned up the garage and at 7:40 woke Jake up. At 8, we walked back to Jake's. I still felt that tripping feel a little. I went and grabbed my bike and thanked Jake for everything that he had done. I let him know I'd never forget this and how much it meant to me. I started biking home and went on the river trail to think about exactly how I was going to break the news. I decided to bike a little bit on the trail because, I'm not going to lie, I was very scared and didn't know exactly how to do this. About 6 to 7 miles away from my house, a bike tire pops. This makes me think of Albert Hoffman's infamous bicycle day bad trip. I walk to a McDonald's, get some hotcakes and a drink, then walk home. And I did what I said I would, and I've stuck with it till this day, and plan on sticking with that very plan that I had that crazy night. I've drank and smoked weed a couple times since, but the point was that my drug use was out of hand, and I wasn't doing it for valuable or productive reasons. This trip helped me be a more confident person overall, and helped me be a better person in many ways. It was the worst/best trip and experience, in general, of my life. Crazy to imagine how intense the peak must have been, because I genuinely can barely remember the ego death part. This trip truly changed my life and my perspective on everything. I focused on things that mattered to me a lot more, like art and athletics, and changed my ways for the better. I feel I am more open and accepting now than before. It's hard to explain, but I see random things in everyday life that relate to tripping. And I feel LSD is more than just the drug. There's something special about it if it's able to change one's perspective in such a drastic and positive way.